Hello, I'm Claire Poole and welcome to the Climate of Sport podcast, the show in which you get the inside track on all things sport and sustainability globally. Join me every week where I'll be chatting to a special guest about news, opinion and insights on how sport is moving to a more environmentally friendly future or taking action on climate change. Hi everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the Climate of Sport podcast with me, Claire Poole. And this week I am delighted to be joined by the one and only Roger McClendon, Executive Director of Green Sports Alliance in the US. Roger, it's wonderful to have you.
Thank you, Claire. It's a pleasure to be on your show and all the great work that you're doing in the UK. And, it's wonderful to have this partnership and collaboration because this is a global issue that we'll be talking about, and we need all hands on deck to make some progress.
Amen. Absolutely on that for sure. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful to chat to you. And I think a lot of people who are listening will know about the Green Sports Alliance, but I'm excited to dig in to share a little bit more about you and also the work that Green Sports Alliance are doing in the summit, etc., that's coming up. So why don't we kick off with a bit of background on you in terms of, for those people who don't know, your journey, to where you are now in terms of being the Executive Director of Green Sports Alliance.
Yeah, I hate talking about myself, but I'll do it.
Come on.
So, absolutely. So I basically cut my teeth with sustainability with a Fortune 500 company globally and was their chief sustainability officer for Yum Brands. And who, for those who don't know, was part of PepsiCo before the spinoff and operates KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, maybe some of your favorite brands around the world. Over 20,000 restaurants when I first started about 2 decades ago, and we grew it to over 45,000 restaurants in my time in there. In that role, I actually created the Chief Sustainability Officer role, worked in engineering efficiencies and understanding how to manage the menu and menu development. But, when you think about the art of people like Colonel Sanders, who thought about the human experience and bringing a signature recipe called KFC or original recipe chicken to the world is pretty amazing. But within that, you have the responsibilities of how do you integrate sustainability within your growth. And that wasn't really a key focus for us at the time at PepsiCo. And I thought it was a huge risk in our business and brought that to the CEO. And so I had an opportunity to do that with my engineering background to bring sustainability to Yum. And we actually made some great progress in that.
Incredible. So how do you go from FMCG to the Green Sports Alliance? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, I learned quite a bit about, the triple bottom line and understanding ESG and really what it meant to know what your global responsibility was when you talk about health and wellness and standards. Because you have a huge responsibility when you bring somebody into your home and you feed them. You want to make sure it's safe. You want to make sure it's healthy and you create a great experience. So, with that, I made a lot of networks, understood the platform. And so when I retired from Yum, I got a phone call from a group now called the Green Sports Alliance to say, hey, can you bring your history and understanding of sustainability from the corporate world and integrate that into sports? And being kind of, back in my college days and a little bit of semi-pro, I actually did play professional basketball and played at the collegiate level at a high level. So I had a love for food, passion, sports, and sustainability from an organic standpoint. So I saw this as a wonderful opportunity to leverage sports, living in Louisville, the headquarters at the time of Yum Brands, also the headquarters or the birthplace of Muhammad Ali and Colonel Sanders. And so those are two of the most famous people in the world, and they had their signature icon, obviously, Muhammad Ali from a humanitarian perspective in sports. So I thought that was really insightful to bring that to the Green Sports Alliance.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. You've been there 3-4 years now? I did
3 years.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah, COVID years. It's really strange because, and I'm standing on the shoulder of giants, folks that created this organization. It is a nonprofit organization. It's a C6, which is a trade organization, and a C3. And all the mission that we have over the 300 different members from the NBA, the NFL, ESPN, now Fox Sports, others that have come into the fold are really focusing in on what they can do within the sports ecosystem to drive this responsibility of sustainability. And I define that more in terms of not just what I call changing light bulbs, but kind of a 3-pillar approach. Definitely we're really aware of the health and wellness with the pandemic we've just gone through. So that's a component of it. The environmental side, obviously, and the human side, meaning the social impact, gender, racial equity, those things fit under that broader spectrum when we think about the Sustainable Development Goals in the UN, or from a bigger perspective, just having the human side of that, vision to be able to drive those impacts.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to talk to you more about that and what the Alliance is doing. But for those who don't know, obviously we have people who listen from all over the world. So Green Sports Alliance, a membership organization in North America. But yeah, tell us a little bit. You've mentioned some of your members there, kind of, people who are currently members or organizations that are looking to be members. What are you bringing for these organizations?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we've been the first over 12 years now, and kind of the largest when you think about our membership network. And a lot of these brands, are multinational brands, whether it's on the solution side, which is our corporate membership, or whether it's on the sports side, like an organization like the NBA that wants to expand their brands in Africa and other locations. And so when we think about it, yes, we're based in North America, but we have a global footprint very similar, and then work partnerships with what others are doing, like you on Sports Positive and others basis. Sanzi, others that have footprints in different markets, how do you bring those folks together and collaborate to accelerate the impact that we want to see? And then the last thing, coming back from my PepsiCo days, is global standards. When you think about climate and climate impacts, it's not located within a region. When you think about what happened with the pandemic, it wasn't located just in a region, it spread around the world. And these issues around racial inequities, from 400 years of slavery, from the US to Britain to Europe, that were engaged and profited from that, we still have some of the impacts that are lingering from that. I like to say this one fact, and, I'm a science-based guy, and, we talked about science-based targets and trying to really use our technologies to kind of deal with these issues and get it out of the emotion of the political arena. But 99.9% of our genome for human beings is the same. Yeah. We are all the same 99.9%. Yeah. But the way we behave and what we see and what we've seen in history, we have our challenges to understand that. We become more nationalistic at times to a detriment, when at the end of the day, we really should be thinking about what's best for the next generation and the human side of what, who we are and what we are.
Yeah. And it seems to be, I didn't know recently that as the things that you mentioned with the vast majority the same, but it seems to be globally, politically, etc. We seem to be, for some reason in this moment in history, focusing on things that separate us, not things that make us the same. For some reason, I think we're seeing it all over the world, aren't we, in terms of things coming to a head in these ways, which is, you feel as though we should be progressing past that and learning from our mistakes and history and making the right changes and driving in the right direction. But it seems to be that we're not. It seems to be that we're still struggling with the same things that have been around for so long.
Yeah, it's very systemic. I was doing a little research on UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. And, when you think about the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment, that was 2006 or so. Before it really gained some momentum. And, the basis of that, obviously ESG springs out of that and trying to leverage the financial institutions to really make movement. And most people think it was an environmental push, but it was really around poverty and some of these issues that we're faced with. This, I would say, profiteering from the humanistic side, like air should be free. Yeah. Clean air should be free for sure. And clean water should be free. There's some basic human rights and human things that we should have. And I think that, when we talk about greenwashing and we think about co-opting diversity, equity, inclusion for benefit, when you have organizations that their government affairs and public relations are running sustainability or DEI, I think it's a little twisted, where they're kind of beating on their chest, but really, what are they doing? What are the metrics here? So for us to look at what's going on around the world, I think we need that leadership, and we need this central, bring that central focus back on the human side of it. Yeah. And it's going to take real new leaders to do that, because we are at odds with each other, especially here in the US. Three things I'll mention, and then I'll turn it back over to you for a question. So we saw what happened in Buffalo, New York, where there was a radicalization of a young man that just went in and started shooting people, killing people. And it was racially motivated. And again, we talk about George Floyd, and we go back before George Floyd, and we can go back in history where there was lynchings in these countries. There were mob, it's bad because, that's a real history. And, it hasn't really gone away. It's just changed some different forms. Yeah. And, Ukraine, you can talk about aggression, with other countries to say, hey, I now want your resources and I'm just going to take them. And if we don't have people that'll stand up when we understand what happened with Nazi and Hitler in those times, then that's what the output is. So we need, as a human race, to collectively bond around these basic human rights and human principles and integrate that into how we treat each other, and take that profit side of it, where you shouldn't profit off of, people's health or people's, freedoms.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I think we talk a lot, don't we, about the intersection of the environment and the social side, because there is, constantly, it boggles my mind. I'm sure it does yours as well. It's like it's 2022 and people in, the Western world, in North America, in Europe, in the UK, and they haven't got access to clean air and clean water. It's like as we get more and more sophisticated with technology and with, all of these things, and we're moving on, it's like, how can we still be having situations where people can either afford to heat their homes or eat, but not both in the societies that we're in, etc. And I think that, and we've had this conversation before, and when you've spoken at the summit, etc., before, this kind of intersection between the environment and the social side, in terms of often it's people who are in more disadvantaged areas that are the worst affected by the lack of clean air or the lack of clean water, because they're in, places in the world where that's worse, or, because of people can afford to buy themselves out of certain places that are affected by that, and other people can't. And therefore they're more impacted by the environmental impacts. And that's why, although we focus quite unashamedly more on the environmental side, because that's an area that across sports generally is the one that's a little bit further behind than the social side, which is more advanced, in the financial side that is, very, very well taken care of. And that's why we're always keen to bring back the environmental piece to the social side, in terms of the intersection there. And I think there's been, I don't know what your thoughts are, but certainly in the last few years, I think a much more vocal discussion around climate justice and intersectional environmentalism, et cetera, in terms of how they intersect. And I know that's something you're very passionate about, and speakers at your summit, et cetera, we get a lot of coverage on that from you, which is great.
Absolutely. I think you can't do really one without the other. I mean, I know we had a focus on it, but as you really begin to think about it, it's intuitive that we have to focus in on the people, the community, right? And I think these stadiums, as we talked about, are anchors in the community, and can be if they become inclusive. And so the sad part is, sometimes when they are doing those large developments, billion-dollar developments, and we think about gentrification and moving people out of that space, and then, the rents go up where people can't afford to live in that space. Yeah. There are some carve-outs. There are standards and, local government that get the stakeholders involved to say, okay, you should have affordable housing here. You should be doing, infrastructure and transformation, around parks and things like that. And you got, but then holding them accountable, because I've heard some contracts are put in place and then people, kind of renege on what they said they were going to do. So I think it's starting with standards, like with the World Cup and FIFA coming here in 2026 in the Americas, Mexico, Canada, and US, where they have embedded those standards and are going to be holding folks accountable to those standards, host cities, and putting sustainability standards in that. And, who do you employ? Did you look at, having a diverse minority contractors in your bid process? Are you doing follow-ups with certifications to say, this is where the standard was, now where did you meet the standard? So that transparency is coming. You see that for corporations on the ESG side, where you have not only frameworks, but the benchmarking tools and the reporting tools and GRI, the standards, so people can actually see what's going on. And I think at the end of the day, those financial, I I guess, motivations that have been put in place around risk mitigation around the United Nations Principle of Responsible Investment are powerful because you see the growth. I think there's like 3,700 now companies, signatories, and now you have like 120 approaching $1 trillion of investments that are impacted by the ESG and the PRIN. And that transparency is through reporting against those standards. And if you don't like it, just like a consumer, if you don't like what you see, and I saw this with apartheid back in the 80s in South Africa, was don't buy the product. Yep. Don't stop at that gas station. In fact, go electric, right?
Yeah. Vote with your feet, as they say. Vote with your feet.
You know, catch the bus.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what individuals can do, is make a common choice around your ethics and behavior after you redo the research and see where they stand, whether it's going to a ball game or supporting your local team. But if they're not doing the right thing, I mean, if they're not in common with your values, are you going to make that decision to vote with your dollar and with your wallet? Yeah. Or now your credit card or your PayPal or however you do it.
Yeah. But that's important, isn't it? And we, often when I'm interviewed and people say, what can individuals do? The biggest thing I think we can do is use our voice with this stuff. Because I say this time and again, and as well as I do, although people see these massive faceless sports organizations and they think, oh, I'm just me, what could I say? We know the people inside those organizations, that the emails come to them of like, I saw this at the game on Saturday, what are you doing about that? And they are taken on board, and they're, a lot of the time they can be used to drive progress forward. And I think, that famous saying, if you think something so small can't make an impact, sleep a night in a tent with a mosquito. It's like it doesn't matter if it's just one person, you can have a voice. And I think that is really, really important for people to remember in terms of driving progress.
Yeah. And there's a positive side. I love that too. So we just saw Commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver, make an announcement about what the NBA is going to do to support climate and climate change, and their impact. And so that's awesome. And then before that, you had Commissioner Bettman of the National Hockey League. They were one of the first to come out with a sustainability report for their leagues and try to get their clubs and teams all focused on sustainability, not just reporting, but action. So I think you can start high level, and it's great that we have these UN frameworks. Yeah. But at the end of the day, we're not, things don't really happen global. They happen local, to your point about that mosquito. So it's on the ground and it's what we're doing at the events. It's what we're doing to hold the supply chain accountable. And it's what we're doing to hold the infrastructure that we need in place, the governments, local, state, and national accountable. And that's where the leadership has to come in. And that's where we're stuck, right? Because like you said, we're 99.9% all the same, but look how different we try to operate, and it's split down the middle. But I think it's misinformation a lot of times and fear, and we try to lead by fear. But at the end of the day, we're all human. And I think there's some solutions that we already know exist at work. We just got to act on it.
Do it. Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to hear from that perspective as well. You've obviously, as you said, got 300 plus members of the Green Sports Alliance in terms of your membership. So where, when you're chatting to them all the time and you're hearing, what challenges are you hearing in terms of the barriers to doing more, or where things are being prioritized or not prioritized, or what challenges they're facing in terms of maybe pushing this forward either more quickly or at all? We know a lot of organizations are at different stages on the journey with this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's probably similar to what you've seen. I mean, COVID really set a lot of folks back and had to reprioritize, and which, well, they should, right? And so as those, arenas were being turning into vaccination centers, because sports weren't happening, or where they were turning into voting centers here in the US to give people equal access to be able to vote. That was spectacular. And so we had leadership evolve. And as we've gotten through to a certain degree, knock on wood, and I don't know where you guys stand on the COVID situation, is that people are now refocusing on the environmental sustainability side. And the pressure is going to come from where corporations see pressure, is that organizations and stakeholders are going to start holding them accountable, and they need to understand transparency and, start to produce impact, right? Yeah. And so I think that's what I'm seeing. I'm hearing, from the leagues, what is the best way to kind of evolve into our sustainability strategies? What does that mean for, how do we report and who do we report with? Is it CDP? Is it, GS? There's a couple of them that are out there, and so what we've done is we've created a platform called Play to Zero, which is really fantastic because it's an existing platform, but customized for the sports industry through the United States Green Building Council. And they are the inventors of LEED certification. And I think everybody in the world now has heard of LEED. And they went after retail because retail and buildings and facilities and homes have one of the biggest environmental impacts. If you can kind of make those efficient, it has a great return on investment. If you think about energy costs rising. And so those standards and how to with those technologies have been put in place with consultants for decades. And so we partnered with them to create very similar focal point that Nike and Microsoft did with their Play Transform to Zero. We call Play to Zero on the sports industry side. So we can look at the data, we can collect the data, we can understand your gap analysis across wastewater and energy. We can bring solutions providers in to help you move your clubs and leagues and roll that up into your reporting structures, whether it's CDP or whatever you decide to use, that I think is recognized globally as kind of the standard reporting structures. And I think that's what we're recommending to our leagues and teams. And then it's the how, so once you understand the gap analysis, then you got to understand where the technology. So we're partnering with some of the most sustainable technology companies in the world to figure out those solutions.
Incredible. And do you, it's, I obviously know about Play to Zero as a platform, but is that, for people who are listening, who, are looking for these, is that a solution where not just the data, but as you said, the solution writers, there's actually, you're helping people with a roadmap to improve, get better. And how does that work?
Yeah. So once you give your data in, you look at your gap analysis and that creates the roadmap. So we have folks on staff and other support folks within USGBC and ARC. Who's the subsidiary that we're partnering with, Chris Pike and his team. And they can take that gap analysis and then say, okay, I'm here, say I'm at 2% waste diversion, which is not really that great. And here's how you can get to 20. And here's some technology partners that have the technology that you could test or have been tested or case studies. And so your roadmap starts to build from there. And then we do recognition on top of it. And so we have LEED, certified recognition, if that's a part through the LEED platform. On our platform, what we could do is what we call player, leader, zero waste champions. And so as you get to that 90%, you can be a zero waste champion at 90% diversion. And so we look at platforms like the Summit, which we'll talk about here shortly, that's coming up, where we can get you on stage and recognize you within your peer group across all the leagues of your accomplishments. But it doesn't matter if you're at 2 starting or you're already at 60, there's a place to play to kind of move you forward.
Totally. And definitely I'm dying to hear more about the summit, which is next month. Hear more about that. But just to finish off this point, I'd love to get your view on, again, conversations I've had with things like waste diversion and water, et cetera. I know in the US, state to state, it varies so much in terms of the infrastructure that's available. So even if organizations are, keen to do more, in some cases, the infrastructure isn't in their state or in their city, their town to be able to do so. And how much are you seeing that as a problem in terms of the desire to do more versus perhaps the infrastructure surrounding some of those organizations that's holding them back?
Yeah, that is a challenge. And that's where I think local government leadership has to step up. The reason we're going to Minneapolis, Minnesota is that they have a collaborative partnership where they have invested in the infrastructure. The NBA team, the National Soccer League team, the football team, all of them are working together to figure out how to leverage that. So if you don't have the infrastructure, there's other technologies coming about where you have mini MRFs that can be brought in. You might have to ship it a little bit further to kind of get it composted or recycled. There's also reuse that is a big part of the solution set, which, now you don't need necessarily the composting infrastructure if you can kind of figure out how to do reuse or kind of some of the traditional things. And that has a better LCA overall when you start looking at the environmental impact over time. And then there's, I guess, pressure that I think leadership, especially with large teams that have, their owners and in their, front office can talk to the local administrator and say, guess what, here's what we would like to do. now can we bring all our partners together and support the infrastructure that's lacking to be able to move forward? So I think those are opportunities, and we'll have those discussions at the summit.
Yeah, I was going to say that opportunity, I feel as though there's always going to be more that sports organizations can do. But for me, that using the group power of sport to drive change outside of our stadiums and venues or tours or whatever, and into local communities to help sport become lower impact, but also help communities become lower impact, is, I think we're getting closer and closer to that. Historically, when I've spoken to organizations about that, they've said, oh, I know, but we're not really doing enough ourselves yet to go to others and demand that they do it. But I really feel as though we're hitting a tipping point on that now, which is awesome. So the Green Sports Alliance Summit, 21st to 23rd of June, US Bank Stadium, Minneapolis. Very exciting, back in person. Roger,
absolutely.
After the last couple of years. So tell us what's going to be happening at the summit and the big ticket items that people can get excited about.
Absolutely. I'll kind of be brief and hit the highlights. So we do start on June 21st at US Bank Stadium, and we call it intentionally Day Zero because of our Play to Zero platform. So the whole theme is how do we, through the sports industry ecosystem around the globe, because it's open globally, leverage our power to move to zero wastewater and energy, and in the future, zero racism, zero gender inequality, zero environmental injustice. And so those things of what we call limitless potential of kind of the human spirit to figure out, what do we need to do to provide people equal opportunities and, what I call basic human rights. Is built into our whole conversation platform. So Day Zero, we go 10 to 12 with stadium tours. We have XL Energy Center, home of NHL Minnesota Wild. We're going to go to Allianz Field, the Minnesota United Soccer Club. So you go sign up, and you can kind of go see what those sustainability technologies are under the arena's operational platforms. There's a couple others that there'll be on that choice. And then 1 to 3:30, we go to Tony Sana and their community foundation, which is our give back opportunity. And that's in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So I want to, focus on a twin city approach. Yeah. And this Tony was an MLS soccer star from, I believe, the Dominican or one of the islands. So a humble background and a humble beginnings, but he's created under roof, really under bubble, the largest under bubble facilities for youth in the state of Minnesota. Wow. And he does, STEM programs, so leadership development for youth. He opens it up for elderly to kind of play on the fields, and it's a full pitch under that facility. And then they take down the bubble in the summer, which is not that long, right? Because they only got about 3 months before the snow comes back and the cold comes back. But he has an unbelievable organization there. And so I want people to see it, understand it, support it, become aware, and help his foundation. And then 6 to 9, we'll have our member networking reception of about 150 people. All our members, MLB, NHL, and folks, including yourself and other folks in this same type of business, coming together with our solutions providers, our corporate member network, and kicking off the evening with a nice little celebration. And then we'll start the program on the 22nd, which is day one. And the thought about it is, we want to think about the big picture and go down to the micro. So macro to micro, and what is driving, the kind of the conversation. What is driving this, and ESG and the financials have to, unfortunately, in our country and in our world today, in a capitalist society, the financials have to be part of the conversation. Yep. So if we don't understand the relationship between doing good and profitability, then people don't do good. They do the opposite. Yep. And so leveraging that from the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investment with large institutional asset managers and holders will have that conversation, because they're going to understand the risk in not investing in companies and divest in companies over time. And I think that was the reason that was put in place, and it's starting to gain a lot of momentum. And I think people are waking up to that. So that'll be the first part of the conversation. Obviously, we'll go into more depth of the how. We'll have the teams, the Minnesota perspective on collaborating to scale community impact, which was your question around the infrastructure. We'll have leadership and investing in sustainability. So we'll have a panel of CEOs talking about their investment, and a couple of CEOs that are not quite there yet. They have nice new technology, but it's only a fraction of their business, and their other business is legacy, which is still not sustainable. And the question to them will be, well, how do you move all of your business to sustainability? Are you going to disrupt your own business to be more sustainable over time. And I think customers have a lot to do with that, but I also think leadership has a lot to do with that, understanding, how you're going to make sure your business doesn't become extinct, actually. Yes. So yeah, that's going to be a lot. And then we have breakout sessions where we'll go and really talk about it's about 45-minute in parallel, about 8 to 10 breakout sessions. And those will be focused on very specifics versus some of the main stage and the panels that are speaking will do a deep dive. And then we'll start over on day 2 for a half a day and do the same. There'll be some conversations around racial equity, new leagues that are coming in, the new soccer league, USL soccer league that's here, Athletes Unlimited, aspirations, and some folks that are getting behind this whole gender pull for leadership within sport, moving from jobs, not just on the field, but the jobs and, all the things that come with gender equity and leadership within sport. And then we'll have roundtables at the end to kind of really get into some nitty gritty conversations for next steps and takeaways that we can work on to the balance of the year until we get to the next summit and hopefully have new solutions and case studies. Yeah. So that's the summit in a nutshell. I go to, our website, and that we have a full breakdown. And I think we sent out in our newsletter a full breakdown. So we're looking forward to folks coming out and being back in person. And we'll follow whatever the COVID guidelines are for the arena, for the stadium at the time. And if we need social distancing, we will. But hopefully you have your boosters and you're ready to go. We look forward to seeing you.
Amazing. And tell me, in terms of the sort of who's speaking at what sort of organizations are coming to talk about some of these?
Yeah, so we've got, because we have the World Cup coming in 2026, so we have Federico Arichi coming back to support us on the stage. We have a lot of our league leadership that'll be there. So Scott Jenkins and our board members will be participating. Jill Savory will be hosting and facilitating, who's an Olympic gold medalist in her own right, and supports 11-hour racing and has done a wonderful job as another board member. We'll have Dow Ball, Airmark, who's one of our key sponsors on the food side. And I want to mention, on that first night, day one, on that first night, we have an award celebration on Play to Zero. So we'll announce our Play to Zero awards, and we'll really, kind of highlight the work that's been done last year. And Airmark, who's our food concessionaire, will be supporting and sponsoring this. So we'll have a vegan style reveal, for folks to kind of taste. And, one of our key partners is called the Game Changers Institute. And I'm not sure if you know James Wilkes, who's, I guess, from your country, right? Yeah. Has done a great job with the Netflix documentary Game Changers, everybody saw. So integrated in everything we're doing is around the plant-based food options that drive performance, number one. Number two is a health and wellness kind of component from a science-based perspective. And that's where a lot of their research has been going to, is actually to prove it out. And then the last component, which people really want to understand, is the sustainable agricultural impact of how you're changing your behaviors and diets. And a lot of the concessionaires through this are jumping on board and testing it. So we have a partner, I can't announce them yet, on the food-based protein, plant-based side, side that will be sharing some of their new technology and their new products as part of the reveal. So looking forward to that.
Amazing. Loads to get involved with. So it's the 21st, 23rd of June, Minneapolis. People can go to Green Sports Alliance Summit. Just Google that. It's going to throw it up for you. And then, and have you still got, presumably you've still got places available for people to register?
We do. You go in, you would see the registration right there online, greensportsalliance.org. And then if you are part of your network, obviously we were looking at a discount code to be able to have free folks if they can still come from international. I know it's been tough with inflation and travel and those kind of things, but would love to see folks come across the pond, so to speak, and participate. And then, sign up for some of the events. We're looking forward to folks participating in Tony Sana and see that, and as well as some of the tours with the stadiums.
Amazing. Well, there's so much to look forward to there, and being back in person and hearing so much leadership. I think I was fortunate enough to go to the BASIS summit in Wales last year. And I think just being back in person, I think people, we have got used to working from home more. We have got used to flexible working, we've got loads done. It's great, but nothing beats that getting together in person, does it? In terms of the conversations that I had, the leadership and that. So I'm sure everyone's dying to get back and be excited about the GSA summit this year.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny, we can't believe it's been 2.5 years. So we announced in Lincoln Financial Field, where I think we last saw each other in Philadelphia, that we were coming to US Bank Stadium. And then obviously with COVID had to delay. But that group has been amazing. I just want to give them a shout out, and that whole team have been truly amazing to kind of want us to be there and want us to come back, and have rolled out the red carpet to host us there. So we should have local government leadership. Keep our fingers crossed. Can't make any announcements there. But this whole collaborative approach about community and how community has come together to solve some of these issues, that it can be done. And it can be done within the economic parameters that we have. And, as we shift gears, in the conversation, that's kind of really where I see it is we have to be aware of companies will try to co-opt certain things, and they have in the history, and greenwash and say they're doing more than they're doing. That's one spectrum. And then there's others that are doing it, but they're afraid to say what they're doing because they haven't gotten all the way to 100%, which I think is an opportunity for us to share legitimate, authentic stories, even if you're not at 100%, even if you're just starting. So there's a spectrum of how we can communicate and talk about those stories for sure. And I think the last point I'll say around the challenges is that I think we as consumers, we all kind of understand and do our homework, and we'll kind of make that final decision where we put our dollars and what we invest in. And I think that's how we can use our voice, not just our voice, but the power of our pocketbook to kind of put an exclamation point of what we really care about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that leads us into maybe a final question for you, just in terms of, the summit, as you've seen progress with your community and your members over the years, and the way things are transitioning, and some of the points you've just raised there now. Going forward, kind of what's your hope for sustainability in sport, even in the short term after this year's Green Sports Alliance Summit, all the way through to 10 years from now? What's your hope in terms of the challenges and barriers we're facing and the progress levels, etc., from as soon as after the summit next month through to in a decade's time? What's your hope for the future?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And, I've really thought about this when I first came in to the Green Sports Alliance. And in fact, in my interview, I had this comment. I told everybody, it was on a panel, Zoom. You're, these 5 or 6 people, and
boxes,
you're there.
Loads of boxes.
And, they're kind of staring at you. And I took a chance, but it was kind of based on my own personality and my beliefs and ethics that I've always held as the highest part of why I, do what I do and why I'm at the Green Sports Alliance. And the framework is around faith, family, community, career, which is F squared, C squared. And I tried to live by that. And I'm not trying to be righteous or self-righteous. I'm just trying to say this is kind of who I am. Yeah. And, I've turned down certain jobs when I was at Yum and before that didn't necessarily fit my personal profile and my values and beliefs as far as how I could gauge and prioritize my life. Mm-hmm. And so and the CEO loved that, because that's how we started the chief sustainability officer role, was because I professed that this is what I wanted to do and how I think I can impact the business. And that's how it worked. So coming into the Green Sports Alliance, it was very similar, and I said, close your eyes, imagine you have somebody's arm around your neck and they slowly are squeezing your breath and you can't breathe. And what do you do? What do you do if you can't breathe? And obviously, what are you going to do is you're going to struggle to live, and, that was Eric Gardner at the time. And obviously he was choked to death by a police officer, just sitting on the corner of doing what he does every day, hustling to try to make a living. Yeah. And so it comes down to really our true beliefs and what are we going to spend our time on? And that's why I'm at the Green Sports Alliance. So our next decade of work It's not the first decade of work. You know, the awareness and creating these campaigns and talking about it. Okay, great. Creating case studies. Now here's where we are. I'm just going to cut to the chase. We have the technology. We're sending people to the moon, and we have been. You know, we saw what happens when we use technology to kind of equalize the playing field in the Ukraine. You know, we know Elon Musk is, you know, not only a rocket scientist, but he could create some fantastic technology. And guess what? With the Tesla, he doesn't even lead with sustainability. He just lets it be faster than any other car, right? And accelerate and have this awesome performance criteria. So it's not about the solutions. It's not about the technology. It's really not about doing the right thing. It's about leadership. And it's about holding people accountable and putting the priority on not profiteering on basic human rights, you know, clean air, clean water. It's about doing what's right for humanity in the sense of, I think our laws really, and I think starting with that leadership, you know, putting that pressure on to do what's right. And so the next decade work, that's what we're going to focus on in the sense of how do we highlight those folks that are doing well in those areas? How do we pull those standards together so people can report so that whole framework of play to zero? And then how do we hold them up and recognize them as we move forward and bringing that platform to a global ecosystem of the whole sports industry? And then the last point is accelerating that. So the last case study I'll tell you about is the college football playoffs. It's the second most viewed and at times the most viewed sporting event in the world as far as viewership. And we had a chance to work with Ryan Allen Hall, who is, you know, has the Playoff Green brand at the college football playoffs. And they wanted to build that equal stature to their extra yard for teachers, which they've raised over $25 million. They highlight teachers, they bring them on the field at the championship game. They have seminars and they continue to improve their development and training throughout the year around the country, which is playing for the next generation, our youth, and educating our youth. And so they want to take this Playoff Green profile and build it like the extra yard for teachers. So we came to Indianapolis and basically they were a 7%, 8% diversion rate, you know, recycling rate, which is not good. We were able to, and I'll grab some of the notes, we were able to pull a full team together through universities, through keep Indianapolis beautiful. There was also a organization that collected food, donated food, and was able to redistribute it to folks that are in need. And we pulled this group together and created an unbelievable impact where we diverted 88% of waste across the whole footprint, not only in the stadium. So it's outside the walls of the stadium, into the expo center, into the Playoff Playlist Live, where they had the concert series, into the hotel systems. And so everything that they touch, which is different than anything else before. So we set records, and it would have been 88%, but I have to put an asterisk and really give you 80 because the first load that we did, actually, the driver on his own recognizance, on his own terms, diverted it to landfill. And it was the most beautiful compost pile that you ever see. And this is what I mean by, like, you have to work at the ground level and you have to work at the highest level and bring those two streams together and execute every day. And that's what an operator does, and, you know, with new standards, is execute every day. And I think I'm hoping that's what we do versus talking and just setting goals. And that's great. But in order to get there, you have to execute flawlessly every day.
Yeah. And I think that's it. The focus now needs, you know, commitments are great and we need commitments. We need ongoing commitments from many organizations to drive it. But we also need to move very much into that action, implementation, execution phase, don't we? To make sure that it's not just words, that actually changes are being made.
Yeah. That's where we're going to partner. So that's where we are. We have got the goals, you know, UN's done a great job and got the system. Now it's like, let's do the work at the ground level locally and engage the community. Let's leave legacy. So I'm super excited. I'm recharged, energized, you know, looking forward to the summit, looking forward to seeing everybody there and supporting, you know, our network and our infrastructure globally. Because again, the last point is you can't do this alone. You need a team and you need partners and you need collaboration. So these partnerships are extremely invaluable. And I do appreciate your leadership and continuing leadership in the space and look forward to working with you in the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the partnerships point is a great one to end on, because there's so much work and so much to do, and we all have to be in it together and stuff. But to your point, yeah, the work on the ground now is the most important to drive these wins and make sure that we are, making that progress every single day and keeping it, it might not be the most exciting, glamorous elements, but that's what it's about, isn't it? Execution every day. That's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, Michael Kraus is our new person on board. He created Food Loops, and he was the MVP of the college football playoffs, because he was day in and day out with a big smile on his face, and we're going through this waste compost pile, and we see, and I have to just quote some numbers. So, because we diverted 117 tons of material from the landfill. We captured carpet, that was turned into a field for a local high school that would have went into the landfill. We 100% diverted electricity source from renewable wind and energy for that, and, Michael on this compost pile, at 2:00 in the morning, just making it work, was in his team of the people that he recruited to help do it. So that's really what it takes. And we showed that it can be done. Yeah. It doesn't have to be 8%. We had to push it a little bit further, 30 miles from the city, to kind of get it done. But what it showed was it's doable. And it really requires investment. And that's where the leadership comes, because not everything is for profit. When you think about some of these things, it's a cost of doing business. Yeah. And that's where, we don't like regulation in this country, and most people don't. But at the time we had a river that was on fire, because of no regulation. So there is a balance between what you need to hold companies and businesses and individuals accountable for. Yeah. And I think that's a healthy balance that we should have, but I don't think it's where we need to be. And hopefully we can figure that out together and maybe drive it with some of that without it. But I think it's going to be a whole stakeholder engagement collaboration process to get to where we want to go. Yeah,
absolutely. I think in the last moments there, you've made a really good point in terms of the cost of doing business. And I think this comes up a lot. A good friend of mine runs an organization called Earth on Board. And part of the ethos of his organization is educating board members on sustainability, so that this work comes from the very top. It doesn't, not at a managerial middle management level, but from the board members. And, something he quotes time and again, which I hold very closely, is that if you're an organization and you are not accounting for your impact on this planet, you are posting fake profits. The profits that you post at the end of every quarter, it's not your money. Because if you aren't accounting for the impact you're having on the environment to make that money isn't yours. You have to take care of the planet. You have to take care of the environment. And in some cases, the natural resources that the planet gives us that enables organizations to do business, that and beyond that, the impact that we have, that has to form part of our bottom line. That has to form part of our financials. Otherwise, the profits that you're posting, the dividends you're paying out to shareholders, etc., are fake. That's not real money. So that, I think, is an extension of what we're talking about, is a really important point. To your point, we have to not be afraid to talk about the financials. And although there's altruism to our work in terms of doing the right thing, to get people on board and to understand this is the long-term sustainability of our sports organizations, we have to understand what those impacts are and what the financial implications are if we don't do that. So I think just tying up a number of different points that you've mentioned there in terms of, again, the path forward and the way we need to be talking about some of this stuff.
Yeah, brilliantly said. So you come into the summit to kind of say that.
I can talk about that. I can get my friend to talk about that. But listen, it's, as always, it's such a pleasure to chat to you, Roger, in terms of your passion for the area and all the great work that Green Sports Alliance are doing, as well as the fantastic summit that's coming up in June. So I hope everyone will go and visit Green Sports Alliance website, find out more. Most of the people, I'm sure, are members. If they're not, you should be. You know where to find these people. So yeah, it's wonderful, the work that you're doing. And I so appreciate you taking the time to talk about it here on the podcast as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Claire. Love Sports Positive. Keep doing the work that you're doing. And I'm looking forward to collaborating more. I hope to come to see you in Europe as well.
Yes, exactly. We can't wait. We can't wait for that. Well, everyone, that was Roger McClendon, who's Executive Director at Green Sports Alliance, on this week's edition of the Climate of Sport podcast. Thanks for listening to the Climate of Sport podcast. Please like and subscribe and get in touch if you want to share information about the work that you're doing, if you want to appear as a guest or you want to recommend guests, or you just have ideas of conversations you'd like us to have. You can get in touch by emailing info@sportpositivesummit.com.